Yeah, exactly, as a square. It's a different vibe entirely. I'm going to be more on analysis. Alright, so here we go. We've got Hellraiser and stats again. We're going to be watching from stats perspective. And I've already given it away. It's a 6-minute video and replay because stats, once again, isn't taking anything to the late game. And quite noticeable about this is Hellraiser wants to. He wants to drag the game out and go into a late game macro thing. And Hellraiser just gets punished for it very, very quickly. We're talking top level Protoss here, so this is the kind of thing that you might expect on ladder up until the very top of the ladder. This never stops. If you're a guy that's like, no, I'm going to learn PvP the right way, I'm going to go and do a macro thing and never cheese, and never one base or two base all in, then there's some sad news for you, because from what it looks like, there is no escape. This is the way. This is the only way. Knowing that there's a proxy doesn't really help. I think knowing that there's a proxy and knowing which tech is proxied, that's the only way that it becomes. And then I think you do have an advantage. See, Stats is actually checking for a cannon rush before his second gateway, so he's somewhat anxious about the cheese from Hellraiser perhaps. Hellraiser is capable of cannon rushing. That's for sure. And here we go. Standard copy and paste PvP opener. The first 1 minute and a half is the same. It's actually exactly 1 minute and a half. And then, look at this. So up until 1 minute 30, it's the same build every time, every game. Same building positioning, exactly. See, even down to the cybercore being in line with the pylon. I think maybe Stats is actually one to the right of the pylon, so he's clearly not following the meta, but up until 1 minute 30 is the same, and then you send your second probe out after the gateway. Either you do a gateway scout, or you do a proxy pylon. And that's when the games differ. At 1 minute 30, there's a difference in the way both players play, and then about 2 minutes later the game is over, regardless of how long the replay is. At 2 minutes, like at 3 minutes 30, you can always call the game, and if the players are about the same level, right? And then that's it. That's PvP. It's basically a 4-minute game. Very, very quick, very, very brutal, where one decision will win or lose you the game, and it's mostly impossible to understand. So it feels like a meta game, knowing your opponent, mind gaming him, that kind of stuff that you need to be very good at for PvP. So okay, Stats is rolling on in. He sees a second pylon, water relief. That's either a very, very fast third pylon where Hellraiser is wasting money, or it's a second pylon in his main. So there's no proxy on either side. And this may be because Hellraiser and Stats don't know each other that well. They don't know how each other plays. At least, like, you may see some Stats replays from last month, but he may not be playing that way anymore in the tournament. So it may be that Stats knows Zest well, so that he knows he can proxy a Robo and get Zest Godems with that. But he doesn't know what Hellraiser does, so he's not going to risk the proxy. It's very difficult without asking Stats or Hellraiser to know. But they both don't proxy. Whereas last game you saw Stats very, very happy to proxy a Robo. Okay, so looking at the units, it's a Sentry and a Stalker. Looking at the production, it's a Sentry and it was a Stalker. For some reason, the Sentry comes out really early compared to the Stalker. Perhaps there's a small supply block. Doesn't matter. The point is we're going Sentry Stalker and then another Sentry Stalker. And that's both players. So they both seem to be doing the same build up until 3 minutes. And to the point that even their probe went and met. It's very funny. The probes that they probably were going to proxy something, but then they saw each other's probe and were like, nah, let's just go home. It's too late. We've seen each other. Let's just gentleman's agreement where neither of us are going to proxy anymore. So yeah, we go Sentry Stalker, Sentry Stalker, Sentry Stalker, and that's it. So the game is identical up until 3 minutes. Mirror matchup to the extreme. And then Hellraiser's making... Wait, no he's not. I think Stats chrono boosted one of his sentries, because Hellraiser's one is really late. Look at how late that is. And Stats is actually making yet another sentry. So Stats is going up to 3 sentries. and just being like, that's fine. This is how we play PvP. We don't have any detection or anything, so I'm worried about DTs. He doesn't know that there's not DTs on the way, and if there are DTs on the way against stats, how is he going to, in time, deal with them? If there's a DT shrine being built right now, on the map anywhere, or even if he scouts a DT shrine right now, how does stats deal with that? We've got a Robo, that's going to come in 46 seconds, and then there's another 25 seconds for the Observer. But the DT can hit at like 4 minutes, so I do wonder about these kind of things. It just feels like they don't respect the DT rush. Or again, it might be a strong meta game. Anyway, something to pay attention to here. There is a slight deviation, a very slight deviation in the build. It's 3 minutes 45, actually about 3 minutes, as I say, about 3 minutes to 3 minutes 30. There's a slight deviation in the builds, and that's where it seems that the game ends. So right now we're just doing Sentry Stalkers off of the gateways, pretty simple stuff. Stats walks a Sentry into the middle of the map, so he gets more out of his hallucinated Phoenix than Hellraiser will. Not like it matters, because Hellraiser loses his Phoenix very quickly, and so does Stats, I think. So I don't know if that's actually worth it, walking into the middle of the map of a Sentry and hoping that 2 Adepts don't turn up and kill your Sentry. I don't think that's very safe, so I'm kind of surprised Stats did that. But apparently he was fine with doing that, and now we go for Twilight and a Forge, and a Robo, and that's the difference. You can see that they start 4 seconds apart from each other, so basically the same time. One player goes Twilight Forge, one player goes Forge Robo, or Robo Forge and Twilight Forge. Okay, so at this point you can call the game and say Stats wins. That's what it feels like, right? Because Twilight Tech takes forever to build. Right? It doesn't take long to get the building itself, it's only 36 seconds. The Robo takes 46 seconds, so 10 seconds longer. However, the time that the Twilight actually does anything useful in a fight is very long. And it's very unlikely that Hellraiser opens charge, though I suppose if he did, he may have had a chance. But he's going to go Blink, which takes 2 minutes to actually research. And even when you have Blink doesn't really help you that much against Immortals and Sentries, which is what Stats is going to do. Stats is just going to 2-base all in from here, and because we have a Twilight on Hellraiser, and it's so easy to scout when you have 3 Sentries and constant Phoenix production. Look, Hallucinated Phoenix, oh look, it's a Twilight. That's not a Robo, that's a Twilight. What does Stats do as a response? He's like, I'm just going to kill you with a 2-base all in. Because he just knows it's rock, paper, scissors at that point, and that he's going to be able to do that. Hellraiser, meanwhile, he sees that Stats scouts his Twilight, and I don't know if he knows the likelihood that Stats is just going to all-in him off of 2 bases, but it doesn't feel like Hellraiser understood that this was going to happen and that this was a real possibility. He definitely knows now. And I think probably this has to do with, like, a lower level Protoss isn't scouting so thoroughly off of 3 Sentries and just constant Phoenixes. Like, the 1 Phoenix hallucination just died, and here's another one. There's like only like a 10-second period where there's not a Phoenix flying about Hellraiser's base. 2 Adepts go down there for 2 probes, so not worth it for Hellraiser. I'm not really sure why Hellraiser tried that, because, you know, Stats is always going to have a bunch of units. And he's scouting so thoroughly, he saw the Adepts with the Phoenix scout. Both players are going for +1, but you see that slow-ass Blink kicking in for Hellraiser. And Blink is a great ability if you think the game's going to go up to 3 Nexuses, right? Because you're going to be able to outmaneuver your opponent's slow-ass army. You're going to be able to pull him apart, blinking into his main and stuff. Especially if you've gone for like a Robo Sentry thing, and you know, Stats takes a 3rd right now, then Hellraiser would be in a great position, because he's got a very mobile 6-range unit that's faster than Immortals and Sentries. You know, that you can use and you can deal with. But just the simple fact that Blink is going to kick in and it won't matter at all, because Immortals and Sentries are much better than Mass Stalker. And that's it, game's over. And Stats is actually so confident, he's going to Robo Bay here. and he's kind of gearing up as if he's going to take a third. You can see he's cut probes. He's not making probes anymore. Hellraiser is making probes. Hellraiser's Robo is about to finish up. Again, I don't know how Hellraiser expects to not die to DTs. It just seems like a gentleman's agreement that the other player doesn't go DTs. Just like you get them on NA ladder and watch them die to a DT drop at 4 minutes. Or maybe a later DT thing with an expansion so it looks like they're not doing a 1-base DT thing. But it just feels like there's a lot of window of opportunity to DT all in. Anyway, look. 2 Immortals. Hellraiser's trying to get some value out of those Stalkers. But we've got 2 Immortals. Hallucination Scout sees that it's just a pure Stalker army. And you've got 2 Immortals kicking in. Something to note here is that off of the back of this, Stats is making a Colossus. And I think that's extremely strong. And you see that that's exactly what Stats did against Zest. He says, look, I'm going to sit outside your main and hem you in on 1 base and make sure that you're not going to expand until you get a Disruptor or a Colossus out, right? Until you get some even higher tech, that's going to mean that me sitting at your ramp is going to be a problem for me. And by then, I'm going to have Phoenixes out and just completely wreck your counter to the situation I've put you in. Again, same thing here. Stats is like, alright, 2 base all in with 2 Immortals, some Sentries, and I'll just react to it. If you know, there's a bunch of Sentries and Adepts and Zealots for Hellraiser when he gets here, he can just make a bunch of Adepts or Zealots and Sentries himself, except he's got 2 Immortals, which are just very, very good at plowing through armored units. So he's always going to have the advantage of this push because we went for a Twilight opener. I was just thinking, even if like we had a million charge lots right now, I think it's just too easy for either Stats just to run away or walk away once he sees what it is and then counter it, or just go and kill it with force fields, because there's no Warp Prism or anything for Hellraiser. He's done a macro build that has just a huge window of time where you just need to not die, and Stats is like, I'm going to kill you in that window of time. And he's just a very good player at seemingly at finding these windows where it's like, you at Twilight, I'm going to kill you at 6 minutes. That's very simple, very clean, and if you go for charge follow-up, or even Adepts follow-up, anything that's going to deal with the Immortals is going to die to the Colossus. And I don't think you can go Stargate as a response to this kind of push. You'd think if there were like 2 Phoenixes right now from Hellraiser, you could lift up the Immortals. And then I guess the Colossus would be kind of good against the Phoenix as well. So like anything that Hellraiser does is going to be pretty weak, or at least neutral against. Like I think if you go Phoenix as the opponent goes Colossus Stalker, it's pretty neutral. I'm not sure if it's like strong one way or the other, because Phoenixes just do no damage to the Colossus. So and Colossus is very good against light units, so that's going to be an advantage always if you go Colossus. But anyway, Hellraiser only has 2 shield batteries here, which is why I was saying I don't think Hellraiser really expected Stats to scout the Twilight and just all in him off of 2 bases. Especially since this is Stats, right? The Shield of Ire, defensive player, not cheesy, not all in. And here he is just doing a cheesy all in. So shield batteries not being here is kind of a problem as well. But we're talking about Stats here. We've got something that gets wrecked by Guardian Shield, Stalkers, and then 2 Immortals as well. So it's just such a brutal PvP again. And Hellraiser is not a low level Protoss player, he's a very high level Protoss player. And he just got wrecked. Just really one-sidedly. Unequivocally wrecked. It feels like he just didn't expect it. He just didn't expect that Stats were just 2 base all in with 2 Immortals. And this was like, there's a Colossus on the way. Like this wasn't the only thing that Stats was banking on. Like if you managed to hold this with whatever, and it wasn't even close to holding it, right? If you manage to hold this, there's a Colossus, there's a high attack unit coming out, so we can always regroup and fight again. And whatever you have as a counter to this is going to get punished by the Colossus. So again, very clean cheese, or 2 base all in. I don't know if you want to call that a cheese or not, but if you look at when Stats attacks, he's cut at 41 probes, and he's going to attack when Hellraiser has 46. So he's only 5 probes down. And then look at the trade that happens here. Obviously Stats just runs ahead. He's got the perfect counter to what his opponent's doing, and then he just all-ins off of the back of that strength. You know, even if we hold here, we've lost all of our probes at the natural. So So look at the resources lost tab. We actually haven't killed anything until just now, and it's the War Prism. Actually, in that entire fight, Hellraiser kills one thing. The probe pull is ineffective because it's walled in by force fields. And then we blink all of the Stalkers to try and get this War Prism, which is so well positioned. Even look at the force field that stops Stalkers from jumping onto the Prism. Stats is very good at this. There's no two ways about it. I actually didn't realize this watching this, but Hellraiser actually only kills a single unit in this entire fight. That's so sad. Look at the force field there. You're not blinking on that Prism. So Guardian Shield. Force fields, it looks... Was that actually Hellraiser? Because I don't feel like... I think that may have been Hellraiser. That's actually quite a mystery now. We're going to have to go find out. Because I was like, it's a bit weird for Stats to do that so early. So it must be Hellraiser. But then Stats just uses the force field as a place to park his... Alright, let's just look at this, right? So we only have a single force field for Hellraiser. And he uses it, yeah, he actually uses it. So in the middle of Hellraiser's army, so Hellraiser's now got a worse concave. But look at the concave for Hellraiser. Like he actually, sorry, Stats is the worst concave. He actually has the worst engagement. Like there's 3 Stalkers, or maybe 6 shooting at any one point. And then he's got buildings blocking the rest of it. So it's actually a really tough place to take an engagement. You can't really retreat, because if you retreat, this isn't great either. Like one force field's going to cut off the ramp and your concave. It's just a really, really tough location. It's a bad natural. You don't get a ramp, and you don't even get a concave to defend. So yeah, actually Hellraiser throws that force field down. And Stats is like, okay, I'm just going to park my War Prism behind this force field. You can see that the War Prism is hovering around that force field. There's no way that Stalkers are ever going to jump anywhere near to the Prism. As long as the Prism lives, you're fine. So again, the force field here, very helpful. Not like the Stalkers were going to jump that far anyway, but it just feels like such a safe way to do this all in. You can see that there's a couple of Stalkers trying to get at that War Prism. And he very slowly shoots it. He tries to force field the Stalkers out. Does our Stats boy there, but the Prism eventually goes down, but like the entire fight ends with just the Prism dying. It's such a brutal exchange. And yeah, the thing is, if you don't kill the Prism, then the Immortals are just going to plow indefinitely on your units. And again, just as easily as Stats defeated Zest, he defeated Hellraiser. It's actually quite remarkable.